welcome to Season 10, Episode 1 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop,
I'm Mark Bishop.
and we are starting a new book for this season. This is by your request. This is the Thomas Sowell Reader, an interesting book from the American Economist, for anyone not familiar with Thomas Sowell, also political commentator, but I guess his day job was really as an economist for the most part. That was his primary field. But yeah, the book we're reading is set up as just sort of snippets of like all of his ideologies and stuff like that, grouped into sections: social issues, political issues, economic stuff like that. And they're very short essays. We covered like the first 10 because there's only like 2 pages long. Just these really brief snippets just showing what he thinks about a particular given issue.
Well, these are from his syndicated column. Do I sound like I'm in a cavern?
I don't think
Is
so.
it just okay? So it's just me hearing that in my own room. I need to
Yes, probably.
put a carpet down or something. Anyway, yeah. So he was a pretty popular syndicated columnist back in the day, I guess 90s, early 2000s, and I would consider him an economist and a social scientist.
Yeah.
And I think and my personal view is that he is the most brilliant modern day American philosopher
Mm.
and social scientist, economist, all into one. I mean, he's spot on so many things, and he's really articulate. And I've watched a lot of interviews of him, long form interviews, like with the Hoover Institution. It's titled Uncommon Knowledge. So if anybody wants to know more about Thomas Sowell and you haven't seen those are excellent interviews where he kind of expounds on some of his writings and his thoughts. And I don't know how many books he's published. And I suggested this one because it's a kind of an overview of his philosophy and his ideas with regard to various issues. And I thought it'd be better than he has a number of excellent books, but they're usually more centered on one type of subject, and I didn't think that would be really productive for our purposes. And I kind of wanted a little more of a free ranging discussion this season.
Yeah, because I think these will give us good opportunities to just kind of jump off and talk about whatever we want to talk about. Because again, they're pretty short and they're concise and they're well written, but there's not too much to like dive into the details of what he really thinks about these things. They're more so like vignettes.
So far, because we're only the halfway through ish of this topic, and I think I think they'll get longer.
Some of them,
depth
for the most part, they're like 2 pages. And I think the ones at the very end, under the section biographical sketches, those are like 10 pages each. But just about everything up until then is these little 2-page sections here.
That is true.
But yeah, I enjoyed this section. We started off with the first 10 articles of the social issues section. So
before we get started, isn't this our first episode since the election?
That's true. It is.
And we made certain predictions.
Yes.
And I can't remember what I predicted, but I believe I predicted my standard prediction, which was that Trump would win the electoral vote, and the margin would be supplied by Minnesota. And I was wrong. He didn't win the electoral college, but he lost Minnesota. But I still enjoy Waltz's home county, but not the entire state.
Yeah. Yeah, my prediction.
Did I predict he was going to win the popular vote? Because I said he might. I think, but I don't know if I predicted.
I think you floated it, but I don't know if you predicted it firmly.
I predicted it firmly in other venues, and I was right.
Yeah, so there you go. My predictions were it was going to be super close, but Trump would just barely win. So I wasn't really right either. I predicted, tentatively that Trump would win, but I don't know if most people expected that it would be such a huge blowout like it was, especially not getting both the Senate and the House for this election. It's crazy.
Yeah. And it's been an interesting phenomenon. I think the fact that he won the popular vote is really going to be helpful for everybody because you've already seen a little bit more reasonableness from the other side. And I feel like
I haven't experienced that.
Oh yeah, I think so. If you look for it, well, I mean, comparatively, like when he won in 2016, they completely lost their minds. Although it was more unexpected because the polls had him, like famously the New York Times had him at 2% chance of winning the day of the election.
Sure.
and he won. So and then they rioted at his inauguration, and it was a whole bunch of lawfare that it was initiated. It was, I think it was election night that they were talking about the Russian disinformation that spread into the that whole Russia collusion hoax. So Hillary Clinton's people were pushing that the night that she lost.
Yeah.
So that's by comparative, that's why I'm comparing it to, and I don't know, I'm still in a slightly optimistic mood about a republic. I think his cabinet choices um, are a real litmus test, um, because they are people that the senators, I'd say a majority of the senators would hate personally,
Hmm.
being especially Matt Gaetz,
Oh yeah, that's crazy.
who upended his, Kevin McCarthy, and of course, all those senators and the big money people loved Kevin McCarthy because he raised a ton of money and didn't do anything.
Yeah.
It was perfect for Senate Republicans. Um, and I think that a lot of people personally hate Gates, but I think I think that will be. I feel like Trump should have, like, as soon as he announced it, he should have gone out like Gladiator. Are you not entertained? And spit on the ground
Yeah. Well,
and
I've seen something that I think is pretty likely is that he's picking, a lot of these people, I think knowing that not all of them are going to get confirmed, and he's going to use them as bargaining chips, right? Because they're all these people that a lot of those, rhinos or just sort of blob people aren't going to want in office. So he's going to say, okay, well, maybe I can pick somebody else for attorney general, but you have to give me RFK for Health and Human Services. We can trade this back and forth. I think that's why he's going partly with all of these really big controversial figures for the most part.
couldn't disagree with you more.
Really?
I believe that if Gates is not confirmed, he's going to find somebody that is even, according to the other side, even worse.
Mm.
And he's going to demand that that person be confirmed. I mean, I think MTG is on the table. Uh, Carrie
Oh,
Lake, Carrie Lake is on the
here, like,
table.
interesting.
That's my view. I think it really is going to be a litmus test. I think he's given the Senate a big FU, and I think that's why he was really. I think his squeeze play is the recess appointment thing,
Yeah.
and I think he got some sort of non-committal commitment to agree to recess if his picks don't get confirmed by a certain date.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I'm guessing, but that seems like what he was doing when he's mentioning the recess appointments, which if they agree to recess, it's my understanding that those appointments will last for that Congress, which is 2 years, and that's all he really wants out of these people anyway. He wants them 2 years, and then he could renominate them
Yeah.
after the 2026 election, if he needs to, or he'll just nominate new people. But usually, if you do a recess appointment, they're considered, persona non grata. They're never get confirmed. But um, I was kind of surprised I didn't see Richard Grenell's name mentioned yet. He's a conservative gay diplomat, I guess. Because that's some sort of qualification or something. But he seemed pretty sharp, and he was a non-confirmed appointee. I think he was a recess appointee. I can't remember for what. And I haven't seen his name yet. I was a little surprised by Rubio, but I
Yeah.
but I think it looks like what he's trying to do is put in a couple neocons, and if you can call Rubio a neocon, or at least not opposed by the neocons.
Yeah.
And then you have like a pseudo pacifist like Tulsi Gabbard, also in that kind of national security state type appointments. And I just think that he has a bench full of incendiary attorneys,
Yeah.
all the way from Matt Gaetz down to nobody knows this Mark Bishop guy, but there's like a million people between Matt Gaetz and me that are attorneys that are ready to just go to war
Yeah.
with the Justice Department. And if they don't, they probably have a better opportunity to fight Matt Gaetz than they would whoever the next person is.
Yeah.
And then I've heard Kash Patel, his name being mentioned.
For
Um,
CIA, right? Or
I've heard it for the FBI
oh,
director,
okay.
but who knows?
Yeah.
And they hate that guy. And like the Pete Hegseth, they're trying to kneecap him with some old sexual assault allegation that didn't go anywhere in
And
17, tried to
the
dirty him up.
yeah, the Homeland Security guy or ICE, head of ICE, right? Tom Homan. Was that what he was
Holman,
nominated for? Yeah.
he's what is he? He's not he was nominated for uh not the top job, but
Yeah.
he's not for his old job, which was just immigration, yeah, like ICE maybe, or I forget what he was, but that guy's been shooting his mouth off all year
Yeah.
about bringing the pain.
Hmm.
Uh, and like the interview with I think it was 60 Minutes a week before the election, they asked him, well, how do you is there any way to avoid family separation for deportations if the child is considered a U.S. citizen? He
Yeah,
said, of
yeah,
course,
ship out the whole family.
deport the whole family. And that's the answer. That
Yeah.
is actually the answer. It's the parents' um, choice to separate themselves from their children.
Hmm.
They're not legally here. That child is a dual citizen, and if they abandon their child, that is their choice. And as he mentioned in the famous exchange with AOC in Congress, when he was a witness, where she was asking about the family separation, and he said, "Well, like if I'm arrested for DWI and I have a minor in my car, I'm going to be separated from that minor because I'm going to jail, and they're not going to take the child to jail. So the family separation is a natural consequence of breaking the law."
Yeah.
And he is the only one that has been using truthful language on the immigration issue. And I'm still waiting for somebody to stop calling them undocumented immigrants and start
Yeah.
calling what they really are, which is documented foreign citizens.
Yeah.
And I don't know why the Republicans are using that language, but somewhere somebody along the line is going to figure that one out and say, no, we're not deporting any undocumented immigrants. We're deporting documented foreign citizens.
Yeah.
Um, and that sounds a lot better to people because people will be like, yeah, deport those people.
Hmm.
They're foreigners, but whatever. So anyway,
Yeah. But I hope, to your first point that this does help people on the left act more reasonably towards, Trump supporters and stuff like that, because, they were absolutely crushed. And, the popular vote was won by Trump. But I don't have too much confidence, at least in certain demographics. Here, I'm in a group chat, a school group chat, just for class. Not like a personal, friend communication type thing. But I woke up the day after the election and they were texting and they were so upset. They were saying, I genuinely don't even know what to do with my day. How are these people so stupid? How are we electing this person? They're, doing XYZ terrible thing just by voting for him. They're saying like I'm just gonna have to drink all day. Like they were like losing their minds. And some
yes,
of them still are. Like they just can't wrap their minds around it. So I think there is still a good portion of that freak out there. And it's like they, this is my common complaint with a lot of the academic type people that I'm involved with regularly, but they just assume that everyone else that they know and in this field is a major
mm,
leftist, and so they just feel free to just like bash on conservatives and say, you're voting for this horrible person that makes you horrible. Why can't they realize it? Not realizing that there's a person who voted for Trump in the group chat with them. It just the thought never crosses their mind, and they just feel absolutely free to rant about how they can't even see the world functioning anymore.
yes. So, but I would say this. I'm still a little encouraged by the discussion that you're mentioning because they're saying they can't even believe they live in a country where a majority of Americans have voted in favor of Trump. And that eventually will break through some sort of barrier where they're going to have to acknowledge that they're in the minority. They're not going to acknowledge you're wrong, but it makes a difference. And it's already making a little bit of a difference in our pop culture. I think it was this weekend, there were a couple of NFL players that were doing as their touchdown dance, or they celebrate after some great play. They're doing
Oh,
the
yeah,
YMCA dance, a la Trump,
yeah,
uh, and that's become a popularized thing. And I think you're gonna see a lot more pop culture references um, that people are. I think we've hit the point where a lot of people will be like, you know what, shut up, like quit complaining that I voted for the guy that more than half the country voted for. So it gives a lot of people permission to say, hey, look, I'm with the majority.
mhm.
Either get in line or get out of the way. And it creates, I think, a certain freedom and a space for people who are stuck in those communities, like you're in that academic world. Attorneys are terribly leftist generally,
Mm.
and and of course, there are people that talk to me, um, as if I'm one of them, and and all you have to do is say two lines, well, of course, Trump's right about everything,
Yeah.
and they oh, I mean, he's not really right about everything, but it's entertaining to watch the reaction,
Yeah.
and now I can say, well, the majority of Americans think that you're wrong,
Yeah.
and
I feel
that's a powerful
sometimes,
statement.
yeah, I feel sometimes like I should speak up, when they go off on their rants, but I have to be with these people for like the next 5 years. So, it's a calculation I have to make if I want to out myself in that way to them so soon.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's all, and it's all how you want to handle it because eventually they're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
Uh, or if they're on their way, if they only have a year left, then you'll never have to deal with them. Um, but it's also kind of not appropriate to even talk about politics when
Yeah.
you're an academic. So what's the point? And so if you're going to take that position, then why engage with it? Because it's irrelevant for the actual topics that you would want to talk about, which are, whatever your academic field is, or, whatever you're trying to communicate about, work.
Hmm.
So if you to be consistent, then you just don't talk about that. That's irrelevant. It's like if they would,
Sure.
because some people go on that group chat and complain that it's rained for the last 5 days. When is it going to stop raining? And that's
Yeah.
benign, but it's also irrelevant.
Sure.
Same thing with the politics thing. But I think you have the same, say temptation or maybe say fault that I do, which is you feel like if you're not contradicting
Yeah.
their lies and their stupidity, that you're consenting to it, or you're cowardly or something.
There was one
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
where I came, much closer. I can tell the story and we can actually start talking about the book. But there's this like Christian coffee shop in town. That's a really nice place just off campus. And I was sitting in class and I was overhearing a conversation between a couple of my classmates in front of me, and they wanted to go work on homework somewhere. And they're like, oh, let's, maybe meet here. Oh, that might be busy. And then they threw out, Pascal's is the name of this coffee house. Like, and one guy's, yeah, is like, yeah, it's kind of crowded there sometimes. And then the girl responds, she goes, yeah, and it's Christian too. Like, as that's a reason to not go. And then the goes, well, yeah,
Right.
but at least they're not, aggressive about it and stuff like that. But it's just like the idea that you can publicly say in a classroom, yeah, I won't go there. And I think it's a bad thing that this shop is Christian, and not have any consequences and just go on about your day because everybody else, most of the people, the rest of the people in the classroom will agree with you. And it's like, yeah, we don't
Mhm.
want to bother, with those Christians. It's a bad thing if it's an explicitly Christian coffee shop. That was just crazy to me that,
Yeah.
she wasn't quiet about it. It was just like a very public conversation. And it's just like, if I had said that about any other religion, they would have pounced on me for sure. But
Mhm.
yeah, no, it's Christian. That's gross. We don't want to go there. It's crazy.
Well, I will say this: most of those Christian coffee shops are not Catholic, and so
That's true. It's not Catholic.
they are kind of annoying, and they'll have like Christian music in there,
No,
which I don't
it's not an annoying Christian music.
really.
It's not been there.
Oh,
It's actually a really nice place, and
so how is it Christian then?
they have like a Christian study group. I think it's affiliated like with the
Oh,
Baptists, and they have a Christian study group, and it's like the Christian Study Center is what it's called. And they have
oh,
like
interesting.
Christian speakers come. I haven't gone to their speaker events, but they have some neat like book club type stuff and things that go on public events. So it's a really neat like program. Like it's not
But
like
it's not like
hippie.
they're not like it's not like you Jesus of Nazareth coffee, or like
Yeah,
they
no,
don't
no.
have
It's just like a
it's
coffee
not
shop.
themed. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not
I
themed
think
as a
it's named
Christian.
after Blaise Pascal. I think that's
Yes,
where the name comes from. And they
right,
have the Christian study events, but it's not like, the kitschy, like, crosses on the wall, Jesus
right.
cup of coffee. It's just like we sell coffee and we have Christian events here.
Yeah.
But that's too much for some people apparently.
There's a coffee shop down in Bonne Terre, Missouri
Mm,
that is Christian. It's a
yeah.
cute little coffee shop.
Hmm.
Uh, it's good coffee and very comfortable setting. But it's overtly Christian. The signs on the wall. Like
Yeah, I mean this,
non-denominational Christian motivational stuff. But the only complaint I have is that they piped in light Christian music,
Mm,
kind of like, Bread Company or Panera has,
yeah.
just kind of like, but it's not good.
Yeah.
The music. I mean, some of the tunes are okay, but
Yeah.
so I mean, but other,
No, this
it's
place is, they don't have music playing. They have like free books that you can read while you're there, like a bunch of
huh,
Christian authors and stuff like that. They have a subscription to First Things magazine, so
it's
you
a
can
good
grab
magazine.
a magazine from the rack down there. Yeah, it's a really nice place, but no,
Yeah.
it's Christian.
I'll have to share with you some offline, some information about the First Things group that I'm a member of.
All
Very
right.
good stuff.
Yeah, but
All
we
right,
should
let's go
probably
back.
finally,
Yeah,
start talking
yes.
about the book. I thought it was interesting. The first, little essay that he has here is really just like a folk tale that he's written himself, kind of an extension of, the classic fable of the grasshopper and the ant, where the grasshopper spends all summer, relaxing, and the ant spends, all summer gathering up his food stores and stuff like that. And then winter comes, then the grasshopper has to rely on the ant for help, and it's a message of be prepared.
And
And of
if I
course,
remember correctly, Aesop's Fable, which is a grasshopper in the ant, I think the grasshopper died, didn't he?
probably. I mean, yeah, that's
Yeah,
those
those are
old
pretty
timey
brutal.
fables. Yeah,
Yeah,
somebody dies.
yeah.
Who knows? But
My favorite is the toad and the scorpion, or the frog and the scorpion, I should say.
I don't know if I know that one.
Yeah, oh yeah, you know this one.
Okay,
Where
well, how's it go?
well, there's a scorpion wants to cross a little stream, and so he says, "Hey, frog, give me a ride across the stream." The frog says, "No, I'm not going to do that. You're going to sting me and kill me." And the scorpion says, "No, I won't do that. We're friends. We're buddies. I won't do that. Why would I sting you? You're gonna give me a ride across this creek, and I'm going to go to the other side, and we'll be happy." They get halfway across the little stream, and the scorpion stings him. And the frog, as his paralysis is kicking, he says, "Why did you sting me? We're in the middle of this stream. We're both going to die." And the scorpion, "Well, I'm a scorpion. That's what I do."
I don't think I've heard that one. That's a
Really?
good story. Yeah.
It's a great, great lesson of, make sure, like if somebody has a despicable character, you know, just know that they have a despicable character and they're going to sting you or you're both going to drown no matter what they say. It's what
Yeah.
they do.
Yeah.
And then, if something has a nature, maybe an animal or whatever, trust that they always have that nature,
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, it's a great,
Yeah.
great, the conservatives love that fable. So you should be aware of it.
I should
So
be.
the grasshopper and the ant, this version of it is, and this is, from the syndicated columns.
Hmm.
So this is the modern fable. So the ant is the same, the grasshopper is the same, but the ant has a buddy who's a leftist.
Yeah. Named Lefty.
Yeah, named Lefty, of course. And Lefty, the ant is like, well, we need to help these people out, and that doesn't matter how they got there, they're now disadvantaged and they need assistance in the wintertime. And before you know it, I think if I remember correctly, Lefty then forms a government agency and is on the dole himself, helping out the various grasshoppers and the other ants. And then the last paragraph is, as the older generation of ants passed from the scene, more and more ants joined that grasshopper, romping and playing in the fields. Finally, all the ants and all the grasshoppers spent all their time enjoying the carefree lifestyle and lived happily ever after, all summer long. Then the winter came. It killed them all.
Yeah.
And it's a great lesson, and it's a timeless lesson, but he just has a modification about the useful idiots
Hmm.
uh, that refuse to acknowledge and if people don't have consequences for bad decisions, they will keep making bad decisions.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing for Thomas Sowell. And he's so articulate in how he describes it. And that'll be a theme throughout this entire book. I have not read this book before, but I used to read his columns. So some of this stuff is kind of familiar, like vaguely, I feel like I've read him before. And I just think, he's got a couple things. One is, if you provide incentives for negative behavior, you get more negative behavior. And secondly, the educational system makes fools of everyone.
Yeah.
It's counterproductive.
Hmm.
So, what are your thoughts about the grasshopper and the ant?
No, I really like, kind of his point here where it's, you have Lefty the ant who's explaining to George, the good ant, about how the world's benefits are unequally distributed. And then George says, the world's benefits, the world didn't carry this food uphill, the world didn't cross the water on a log, the world isn't going to be eaten by any anteater. That's kind of like how the dialogue plays throughout this, and I just really enjoy that because it's like the Lefty ant is all talking these big theories and
Mhm.
everything's, unfair and unequally provided, and then the good ant is like the voice of reason. It's like, well, no, I put work into this. I did this myself. It doesn't really matter what your weird theories are. This is my stuff, and I'm the one who prepared. I shouldn't have to give that to somebody else.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it's a good good little, a good start to the book, because I
yeah.
think he does a great job in kind of explaining the it in an analogy and a little story. I should have read that to you when you were a little baby. It's a little dark at the end.
Yeah. That'd be a little
Dad, but
rough.
Dad, what happens at winter? Well, they all die. Good night. A dark death creeps in the window. Good night. So the next one is the Ever Wonder Why, I think is the next one. Is
Yeah.
that right?
That's right.
Yeah, is the Ever Wonder Why, which is you know the discussion of what he says. I love this line. The question is whether the glass started out empty or started out full, rather than is it half empty or half full. And it's like people don't seem to ask, you know, why the things are the way they are, and they just want change. Change for the sake of change, without really considering the ramifications of upending an established system. And he makes um, an unpopular or assertion about the overthrow of the czars in Russia. And he mentions, for example, the czars never executed as many people in half a century as Stalin did in one day.
Yeah.
And people forget about that. So if you're trying to, like, people that, what I was really struck with all these initial columns and writings of his, is how timeless they are. I mean, they were written probably about 20 plus years ago.
Oh, at least I think this
Yeah.
reader was published in 2011. So these are
Yeah.
already like, at least 15 years old here.
What did I say? 20 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'd imagine a lot of these are coming from earlier than the year that the book was published, because it's
Correct.
going back through his whole history. So a lot of them are probably more than 20 years old.
Some, yes.
Okay. I just think it's like that some of them are older than 20 years old.
Yeah, but he says, anyway, I just thought it was a really good description
Yeah.
and assertion that we shouldn't really, especially I think he makes a brief argument basically against our foreign interventions, overthrowing foreign governments and expecting it automatically to be better.
Yeah.
And people should have thought of that before the Iraq War and all that.
Because I really
Any
like what he
thoughts?
says. Yeah, I like what he says. To be for or against change in general is childish. Everything depends on the specifics. To be for generic change is to say that what we have is so bad that any change is likely to be for the better. And that's, I think, a very, very common sentiment. Just sort of like the vague ideas of like progress, I think is the big like good word now. As long as we're progressing towards something different, then we're doing good. And the old stuff is, why would we pay any attention to the old stuff? That's the old stuff. We need something different now, and anything that's in the past is bad, and we're inherently becoming better as long as we're changing. But a
Yes,
lot of people don't actually consider what are these things that we're uprooting and what are the things we're putting in their place. As long as they're different, people are happy.
yes, yes.
Yeah. No, another good essay. Again, very short.
Yeah.
Um,
And then the next one is a quote, "Duty to Die,"
mm,
which really talks about shipping the elderly off to
yeah.
what is the in the Lord of the Rings, when they go off in that boat.
De Valinor?
Yeah, they're going to Valinor, but we're not necessarily sending our elderly and infirm off to Valinor. We're
Yeah.
just saying, why don't you go somewhere and die?
Hmm.
And he has, he grew up very poor,
Hmm.
and so a lot of these lessons from these affluent leftists, and he was a leftist in his youth.
Yeah.
Thomas Sowell was. And so, but he references, like when they were very poor, they would take in, relatives or other people that were vaguely related to them that were just in need.
Yeah.
And but he mentions, I like the one quote, my favorite maybe from this article or whatever it is. He says, apparently you need a lot of expensive education, sometimes including courses on ethics, before you can start talking about a quote duty to die.
Yeah.
And he says, much of what later he says, much of what is taught in our schools and colleges today seeks to break down traditional values and replace them with more fancy and fashionable notions, of which duty to die is just one.
Hmm.
And it's part of the culture of death of the leftists that this thing, the cost benefit analysis. And he was really prescient with this when he was writing it, because you see this push in Canada and a lesser extent in Great Britain or UK, for the state funded medical care that they're making decisions to not provide the same level of treatment for somebody who's elderly, and they just figure they're making a cost benefit analysis that they shouldn't provide that treatment because the lack of return on the investment, so to speak, because of
Yeah.
life expectancy issues.
Yeah, I always think of that one story from Canada. I think it was like a veteran who needed to get like a chairlift installed in his home, or something like that. And while he was at the doctor, to be examined or something, they kept giving him information on like assisted dying. It's like, wouldn't it be better off if you were just dead? It's
Yeah,
like it's
right.
insane. But I mean, it's a very common thing.
Yeah.
And you're seeing that now, not even just with elderly people outside of like euthanasia and stuff like that,
Mm.
but just like, oh yeah, if you're having too much pain, we can set up these horrible little assisted suicide pods and kill you. Um,
Yeah.
that'll be the end of your pain. And say that's just so terrible that it's being promoted like that.
Yeah, now they're doing it with emotional distress
Yeah.
and autism and all the other inconvenient medical
Yeah. Well, it's so
conditions.
so wrapped
It's
up with abortion too. I mean, those same
well,
arguments
that's
are
true.
what they make
Yeah,
there.
and one of the things I think anybody who advocates for this kind of assisted suicide, they should watch a documentary. I forget what the title of it was, and I think I mentioned it to you before. Maybe I didn't. There's a documentary about the people that would jump off the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, the suicide attempts. They may have modified it now, so it makes it harder to get, but it was relatively easy just to get up on the railing and just jump off.
Yeah.
And so much so that a lot of them were caught on camera. And anyway, so they interviewed people who either got pulled off the ledge, or the ones I found fascinating were the ones that were interviewed who actually jumped, landed, they broke their legs or their back or whatever, but they survived because
Yeah.
they have like a water rescue team there very quickly because happened frequently enough. And I was struck by, um, the interview asked, well, what were you thinking? As you're going down, were you happy to be rescued, or were you upset, when you got rescued? And the ones they interviewed said, well, I regretted it,
Yeah.
but I was already falling.
Hmm.
And that just really struck me, because they've gone past that point of no return, and I wonder about all these other people in this assisted suicide, and I wonder if just two people would come up to them that day and say, hey, look, we value you, and we really insist that you not do this because we want you to be around with us. We love you and we care for you. I wonder how many of them would actually do it,
Yeah.
go through with it. And but they're getting this cost benefit analysis, and you're already depressed. You already made those calculations in your mind,
Yeah.
that everybody be better off without me. And then you hear this professional do the math.
Yeah.
Wait, what? Well, you put it that way, I'm a negative $252,000.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you saw the story from, I think it was in Belgium. This was recent, where they have those like suicide pods and they were starting to use them. And they found that I think it was the first person to be killed in one of them. The autopsy revealed strangulation marks on her neck. So the pod
Huh.
probably didn't work. And it's supposed to suffocate you. So it probably just gave her incredible, like severe brain damage, and she was still alive. And then whoever's
Oh,
running this company killed her, like
oh
with
my
their hand.
God. Wow.
It's like this horrible dystopian thing. I mean, the thing itself is terrible, but it's like, if it malfunctions,
Yeah.
okay, you've just given someone horrible, debilitating brain damage, probably put them in a coma. It's like now you kill them with your hands. It's terrible.
Yeah. Well, I think that anybody who really who participates in that should. you know how they have like in cars, they have crash test dummies, like to test the safety of vehicles and crashes. I think if we're going to really go forward with that, we should test that on everybody who is going to do it, administer it. They should have to do it first. And then if they survive, then we can get you do it to everybody else.
Yeah,
A
that's a good
little,
strategy.
little absurd humor, but why not? I mean, they're a net negative. If we're going to do a cost benefit analysis for people living or dying, I'd put them at the top or the bottom of the net negative value for our society. You're out here, killing innocent people.
Hmm.
What? Well, I'm not killing them. I'm just setting it up so that all they have to do is go boop with their finger and then they die.
Yeah.
Same difference. Anyway, any other thoughts on that one?
No, no, it was another good one there. But I really like this next one titled "The Money of Fools,"
Mm,
because he quotes Thomas Hobbes. He says Hobbes said that words are wise man's counters, but they are the money of fools. And essentially, his message throughout here is something that I've thought a lot about, and I know I've talked about here. But it's essentially like whoever controls the language of a certain issue really kind of controls perception of it. And he brings up rent control, where it's like, yeah, that sounds good. We should control and make sure rent doesn't get too high. But then he says, well, look at the places with the highest rent control, and they have the highest rent, San Francisco,
yeah.
New York. Or gun control. That's not actually controlling guns. Stimulus checks don't stimulate the economy. And it's just all about, we can kind of cloak things in these nice sounding words so that people, kind of support them and make them sound good on principle. But in reality, they don't do anything of what they say.
Yes. And yeah, and his final sentence is always great. He says, "You can talk or act as if society is both omniscient and omnipotent, but to do so would be to let the words become what Thomas Hobbes called them, the money of fools." Because he's saying you're trying to control this or control that. The only way you can do that is if you're omniscient and omnipotent to foresee all the problems and have the power to change them. And it's a fool's errand,
Yeah.
and it's an arrogance, and it always has unintended consequences that are far worse than what you're purporting to do.
Mhm. But yeah, no, he makes really good points there, points that I really agree with and have talked about before. And I hope he talks about that again because I think that is a
Mhm.
very important issue is how you can use language really just to fundamentally, favor your point or oppose someone else's and things like that. Just the power of words there. Um, but yeah,
Yes.
then he moves on to the next article here, next little piece, boomers and boomerangs. This
Yes.
one was kind of funny. This one was almost just the statistics of just how many people are living with their grandparents rather than living with their parents. Either the parents are absent or in jail or things like that. And he says that increasingly the number of children that are moving in with their grandparents has just skyrocketed when in the past it's been the opposite. Usually when
Mhm.
grandparents get too old, they move in with their children for them to take care of. But now we're in this complete reverse where now it's the younger ones are skipping up a generation to live with them.
Yeah, and I didn't have time. I meant to look up the stats because now we're 20 years later or so from when he wrote this, because he's citing, I believe, the 2000 census.
Yeah.
So we've had two censuses since then, and I think it's only accelerated
Oh,
across
sure.
all groups. He makes some interesting arguments, and I don't know what to think about these because, well, of course, our family's a two-income family, but he mentions how where he says, it's a cop out. This is a quote from him. It's a cop out to say that they're forced to have two income families to quote, to make ends meet, end quote. And he's making the argument that, we're all making choices to live this relatively affluent lifestyle that's so much more affluent than it was in the 50s. Like if you look at the row houses, like if you have any older area of town, like that were built in the 40s or 50s, they're going to be what we call like row houses or they're like cookie cutter houses or they're so much smaller. They're like,
Yeah.
maybe 1,500 square feet, if that. They probably have 1,200 square feet. One single story, and they'd raise five kids in there,
Yeah.
and of course, if you do that, and I think I don't know if he mentioned this one or if it's a different one that he never even thought of getting a car. Of course, he lived in an urban area where you'd have public transportation, or if you're in a really rural area, if you're living in town, you don't have to go anywhere because there's nowhere to go. But um, so it was an interesting argument. But he's also talking about how um, he's talking about like people that are immature. They're forever adolescents, which is, he's saying this before it was fashionable to say it, in my opinion. But he says people don't usually grow up when there are other people who make excuses for their immaturity. In a non-judgmental world, who is to tell the irresponsible parents to grow up?
Yeah.
And you're seeing a lot of themes like this. And I think I might have mentioned this podcast before. I've long held the view that the baby boomer generation is the worst. But now I'm starting to think that my generation was worse than them.
Mm.
Because if you look how, like, my generation was raised, of course, my parents, we kind of skipped the baby boom generation because they were older.
Yeah.
They were 42 and 45 when I was born. That was their age that year that I was born. So, yeah, I was born in the 70s. So, but like our generation, even just in our area, there's so many people that were just dumping devices on kids very, very young.
Yeah.
It was all your compatriots. And then, and this whole helicopter parenting was my generation doing that, was to the next one, and all those kind of issues. And I'm sure, Thomas Sowell's had thoughts and wrote about all that stuff too. But it's an interesting concept when he's talking about the statistics and the trends of, like you said, grandparents used to move, home, you take care of them as they get older. And now at some point, your mother and I are going to be faced with that dilemma with regard to my mother-in-law. But we've already said we're going to have to figure out some way to make it work.
Yeah.
Because no matter, I mean, and she's a great people. I'm not saying anything bad about her. But with anybody, especially somebody that's lived on their own for so many years, they're going to be stuck in their ways. It'll be an adjustment.
Yeah.
But I mean, we fully expect that as long as she's physically able to, we're gonna figure out a way that we're all in the same house.
Yeah.
Because to do otherwise would be really immoral.
Yeah.
And whether so anyway, so it's really an important discussion about, okay, what are we going to do with these baby boomers, and how do they raise their kids, and how are we raising our kids, and what kind of choices are you really making when you have two professionals in the house? And those are tough decisions to make, as people get married and have kids and stuff.
Yeah. No, it made me think of, I think it's Matt Walsh who's been arguing with people on Twitter recently, about,
He's always arguing with people on Twitter.
Specifically about this issue, about like people who say, well, it's just too hard to have children right now. And it's just impossible. And he's saying, well, maybe it's slightly harder now than it was 4 years ago when the economy was a little bit better. Like, yeah, we're in a little bit of an economic slump. But relatively speaking, it's never been easier to have kids and start a family. If everybody waited until the exact perfect moment to have children, humanity wouldn't exist anymore. All of our ancestors did it in much tougher conditions. To your point about the row houses and having 5 kids in these tiny little cramped places.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's, people are like, well, I won't be able to afford, the nicest food. If I have kids right now, I won't be able to afford that trip, out of state or out of the country. Therefore, I can't have kids right now. It's like, well, you're prioritizing the wrong things, and that.
Well, and you see a lot of weird unnecessary spending, which we never did for you guys, on like select sports and these traveling teams and that kind of stuff. Back when we were growing up, there was when I was living in Peoria as a little kid, there was a little community center that was down the street. And, if they had a program, then yeah, I'd play over there, but they were never going to go anywhere for a little league game. I mean, who does that? That was just a weird concept. And, a lot of our people of our generation were like, they were traveling to Nashville, with these little kids playing baseball and stuff, and these traveling teams, and the fees and everything was crazy. And back in the day, people that are older than me, there'd be a park down the street, and it would be unorganized ball, like Sandlot.
Yeah.
That was a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
Even my generation, but I think we're starting to lose it, like in the 70s and then into 80s. But
I know one of the big things, just compared to me and like my friends growing up in grade school and stuff, was like no Xbox or PlayStation.
mm-hmm.
That was a huge thing that I thought was weird. When I was young, why don't we have a console? We had the Wii, which I think was a gift. I don't think you guys got that for us.
Yeah, but I think we gave permission for it.
Yes,
because it was relatively non addicting.
Yeah. Yeah, but
That
it's
was really
like,
your mother's decision. I mean, because I played video games when I was a kid, but boy, I think that was a good call.
yeah, no, I
I
agree.
mean, I don't know if you guys really appreciate it, um, but yeah, that's a real time suck if nothing else.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
Well, you were the only kids that would go to the library that we knew. I
Yeah,
mean, no other kids that were friends with you even knew where the library was.
yeah.
I think we took Carter to the library once. What's this place? You check out these books. Check them out. Yeah, you check them out and you read them and you bring them back. Oh,
Oh, that's funny.
I think it was Carter. It was some friend went with us.
Um,
and it was funny because like, we you guys were just so voracious readers. It was just so normal to do that, and
I know one
all
of the things that you said, which I think might contribute to a problem that I have now, but you said you would never say no to buying a book.
yeah, for
And
sure.
now I say I never say no to buying a book for myself, and I have two full bookshelves, just stacked with books and totes full of books in the basement back home, just everywhere. So
Yeah, it's not healthy as an adult, but like if your kid is in the books is in a toy store and there's books and they're like, I want a book. Yeah, of course.
yeah,
Or if you're at Walmart, hey, can you give me a book? I'll get you a book.
yeah,
I mean, there's nothing except for like the crazy crap they sometimes have with these weird, crazy social justice stuff, but
the banned books.
transgender and the
Yeah,
porn and stuff. But I mean, assuming it's just a legitimate little book, there's no bad that comes of that.
yeah,
I mean, it's an expense, but then you have it. But yeah, uh, yeah. I think we should have delayed the phones and stuff with Eli.
mhm,
But at some point, as a parent, you get more and more lenient and lax as the kids come along. Uh, you're you're a true believer at the beginning, and you just get worn down
yeah,
with each successive child.
yeah.
I'm the youngest of five, so I can speak from the experience as a child too.
Yeah, then he moves on. He's still talking about the family here. The next one
Mhm.
is the family becoming extinct? And essentially saying, we're losing the traditional family. More and more people are, married without kids or unmarried, living alone by themselves or unmarried but with a partner, and stuff like that. And essentially, he's just arguing, stuff we've talked about here before, with just, the benefits of living in like a married household. And,
Yes. Well, he's also making the argument then that it's not as bad as what people are saying.
that's true.
And so he makes that argument first. I think it's worse now, though.
Oh,
So I think, but he's talking about, it depends how you look at it. He says any reports of the demise of the traditional family are greatly exaggerated. And I think that is true. I mean, I think there are, I think that most families are, a traditional family now, even still, because I think it's like, uh, was it 60% or so? I haven't looked at the stats in a while, so I shouldn't even guess. But a majority of kids in the nation, I believe, are still born um, in an intact married household, I think.
yeah.
But there are certain subcategories, like the African American community is just decimated. I mean, it's like over 75% are not a two parent household, I mean, husband and wife married couple. And the Caucasian or white or whatever you want to call us is accelerating every year. It's getting worse and worse every year. And the statistics are, like he quotes the book The Case for Marriage, and this was written around that time that was out, and that was published in 2001.
Hmm.
So that column was written after that. But anyway, um, so he's and I have not read that book. I remember when it came out. I meant to, but I didn't. But um, there's this push, and there's even more push now to equalize other forms of family in their effect. Um, Now, I think there's two issues with analyzing different family structures. One is moral, so I think you make an argument, hey, there's nothing immoral about two people living together that aren't married. Okay, that's a religious or a moral argument. But the practical arguments are refutable. Like meaning, what's the outcomes for the children?
Yeah.
The percentage of kids that are successful, that are happy. If you do a survey of children's happiness or minors' happiness, the ones that are in intact married households are astronomically better than people that are single parent households. That's not to say that single parents are bad people, especially if there is abuse and all that kind of stuff. But you look at the financial effects of it. But like in my experience in the legal system, there was one thing that he mentioned that I thought really rang true for me. He says, women who are, well, as he says, this is his quote, women who are shacking up are 4 times as likely as wives to become victims of violence. And their children are 40 times as likely to be abused by live-in boyfriends as by their own parents. And I think that's 100% true. And that's the one thing when I was a young prosecutor that really struck me, that how many women chose the boyfriend over their children's safety. They had an abusive boyfriend, and I understood the domestic violence side of it. Like if you're manipulated and all that kind of stuff, but I never did, and I still don't understand how a woman can put her own children at risk with an abuser who abuses the children. I just, and I don't. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't say this so bluntly, but I have no use for them. And I think they should absolutely go to jail
Yeah.
along with their boyfriends or their husbands if they're married to them. But it's mostly they're looking for love in all the wrong places,
Mm.
as the song would go. You know that song?
Yeah, I know that
Looking
one.
for love in all the wrong places.
Yeah.
Looking for love in too many places. Um, uh, and that's sad for them, but it's a nightmare for the children.
Oh, absolutely.
And for crying out loud, um, be lonely.
Yeah.
Okay. If the choice is have this jerk come into the house or you feel lonely, feel lonely. I
Yeah.
mean, I just don't understand that. I never have. And it's a huge problem that no one is willing to say. And that's really why um, I think people can be critical of single mothers.
Mm.
It's almost universal that they make mistakes bringing these guys around their kids. And it's really a criticism of men
Mm. Yeah.
primarily. But the men, they have their own responsibility to behave themselves and not abuse children. But if they're boyfriends or stepfathers or whatever, they don't have a primary direct relationship with the children.
Mm.
It's through the woman.
Yeah.
And so the woman has the primary responsibility to the children, keep them safe. And so I don't say I blame them, the mothers more, but it's for me, it's a close call
Yeah.
because they have a special duty. And if you don't do that, my God.
Yeah.
But so then you look at the outcomes, and he's right financially in all measures. People that are born out of a non-intact married couple more likely to go to prison, more likely to be on drugs, more likely to be poor, and it's something that we just don't talk about in
Yeah.
public policy. It's just
And the
unfortunate.
issues have gotten, more prominent and also stranger, since he wrote
Mm,
this. I think especially of like things like those polyamorous couples,
yes,
not even couples, multiple people, I guess technically.
couples.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like they want to adopt children. And it's like, what kind of effect is that going to have on kids? And I've seen like, people on Instagram and stuff like that, like being like, this is actually happening.
Mm,
Where it's like they adopt these children or something, and it's like 3 or 4 people living together, like as this, quote unquote relationship with each other. And it's like, how is that child going to grow up? What kind of
yeah.
horrible effects is that going to have on him? It's nothing good for sure.
Yeah. And we really need to enforce bigamy laws. We need to enforce it in the common law marriage setting.
Hmm.
And we ought to say there's two of you, pick two. Everybody else is out.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then we're putting you all in jail. Because I mean, nothing good comes of that.
Yeah.
And they don't, the media doesn't want to talk about those bad outcomes for those children. Um, and I know it's just one case, but there was that one horrible case. It's out east, maybe it was in Georgia. There were a prominent gay couple that adopted 2 little boys. The
Mm.
2 men adopted 2 little boys, and then had like a child rape circuit that they organized and facilitated. And that I'm not like I've talked about the death penalty a few times in the podcast. I think child rape I wouldn't be opposed to expanding it to that under certain circumstances. You
Well,
have
it's
certain
especially if you're orchestrating a whole ring,
yes,
not just
right.
like a one-time action of it, but if you're the one responsible for this whole horrible program, then
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
disgusting.
that case was really wild because they filed an objection to the charges because they had ranges of time. So whenever you have a child sex case, um, you say, well, because the kids aren't going to know that for the calendar. They're going to say it was a spring or summer. It was this year, it was when I was 3 or whatever, or 5. Well, 3 is really young, but let's say it's 6. I was 6 years. I remember it happened sometime around my 6th birthday. So you do like a 6 month period of time around that birthday. 3 months on one side with 3 months on the other, and you don't specify the date. Anyway, so they did that in that case, and they had enough counts to lock them up for the rest of their lives anyway. And there was an objection filed by the defense saying this is not specific enough. Well, as part of the investigation, they had a home surveillance system that there's one of those systems that videotaped the interior
Hmm.
of the house, the living room, the kitchen. I think it might even been in the bedrooms. And so then they scoured those videos and were able to specify it.
Ugh,
And I just feel bad for the investigators and the prosecutors to have to deal with that in the court and all that stuff.
that's terrible.
But yeah, those um, the people like that make me start believing in actual demons.
Yeah,
And I know it's in the Bible and everything, but it's hard for me to conceptualize. But then I start thinking, okay, yeah, all right, that's the demon.
yeah.
And I know we're not supposed to judge. It's God's job, but if they're not going to hell, I don't know. I don't know what to. I don't know. I don't know if I'm signing up for that one. Yeah,
Yeah.
that the religion that doesn't know they're going to hell. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you think God could forgive him? I guess he could.
Sure. I mean, if they're
Anyway,
really sorry, I guess, truly. But oof. But yeah, his next essay in here is about poverty. And I think we've kind of talked about this a little bit in connection
yes.
with the others. We don't have to talk about this too much, but essentially, the metrics of poverty, have kind of changed, where it's like, even the people who are living in sort of the lowest classes of modern society have so much more than people in poverty, 100 years ago would have imagined, or even people in the middle class 100 years ago, or even a lot of the rich people 100 years ago. Just comparatively, all of the technology and clothes and stuff like that we have now would have been unimaginable to people in the past.
Yeah, and he's referencing a book called Life at the Bottom by Theodore Dalrymple. And I don't think I've read this book either, but this was published in 2003. And he had written a number of columns. I think he might have written for National Review, or maybe as a guest columnist. I'm not sure, but he's a brilliant writer, and he's a physician, as this writing mentions. And of course Thomas Sowell says, he appreciates the book because Dr. Dalrymple was treating patients and studying them in England. Was part of the underclass, and the benefit of that was they're all white. So the abusers, the gang members and the violent people, and then the victims of the crimes, everybody was white. And so you just take the racial angle out of it, which I really wish we could do, because it's not the race that makes the difference, it's the culture. And that culture can be in a big trailer park in Jefferson County, or it could be in a inner city African American community. It could be anywhere where you have this culture of violence. And I thought what was really where did he say? Yeah, he mentions in page 17, and he's I don't know, he's not really quoting, or he's partially quoting Dalrymple, but he says, by having their physical needs taken care of by the welfare state as if they were livestock, the underclass are left with, quote, a life emptied of meaning, end quote. And Dalrymple says, since they cannot even take pride in providing their own food and shelter as generations before them did, and I just think that is so important to realize, even if your intention is good to help out people, if you don't go about it the right way and you're just taking care of them like they're cattle, they will act like that. That you'll crush their souls. And I don't know how people survive. I mean, they can't be happy with this situation, and there has to be a certain amount of self-loathing, or certainly they don't feel great about themselves if they're just being taken care of by the government. no
Yeah.
matter who they are or how they were raised.
Because that's what
It's
he
soul
says.
crushing.
Yeah, a little bit later, because as you mentioned, Dalrymple was raised in poverty, but he says, Dalrymple's father was helped by those who taught him and held him to standards, treating him as a responsible human being, not livestock, and that's
Yes.
what enabled his son to become this doctor and write these books and stuff like that. He was treated like he had responsibility here, and he used that responsibility to help his family out of poverty.
Yeah. And that's what used to make America work so well,
Yeah,
is that there was a ethos of personal responsibility and hard work, and bad things would happen, and the whole idea of a safety net and I still agree with the safety net.
yeah.
But a safety net is for when you fall out of the trapeze. A safety net's not when you're just walking through the tent, right? If you're the circus and you just fall, you don't need a safety net. You just need to get your ass up. Pardon my language. But if you're doing, if a trapeze artist falls from the trapeze and falls on top of you, okay, yeah, then that was unexpected, and you're not at fault for that. It had nothing to do with, that's a safety net. Yeah, so we should take care of those situations. But it's kind of a silly analogy, but I think it may hold
It
up.
works. It works.
Anyway,
But yeah,
so
his
then, yeah, go ahead.
his next essay is really good too. Again, talking about education. I think a lot of this book is going to be about education, but it's called
For
Twisted
sure.
History. And I like his one of his examples here, because essentially his argument is we're twisting our history in children's classrooms for ideological purposes. And this is a quote. He says, "How would you feel if you were a Native American who saw the European invaders taking away your land? Is the kind of question our children are likely to be confronted with in our schools. It is a classic example of trying to look at the past with the assumptions and the ignorance of the present."
Mhm.
And that's very true. Is I think so much of education now is like, well, let's look at this critically, and look at it from the perspective of these other people. And it's all serving, sort of the same ideological purpose, because so many, educators are just left wing, and are trying to push, their own narrative on students and stuff like that under the guise of justice or things
Yeah.
like that. But in reality, it's just twisting everything.
On that Native American issue, which of course is a lightning rod for me that usually gets me on a
Yes,
rant.
no, I know.
Uh, so I'm glad you brought it up.
Uh-huh.
I was just listening to the most recent Joe Rogan interview with Theo Von. So Theo Von and Joe Rogan got together, I think within a week of the election. Of course, they both interviewed Trump during the campaign, but during the course of this 3 hour conversation, somehow they get some sort of thread. And Theo Von mentions, the Native Americans and how terrible it was we stole their land. And Joe Rogan, of all people, says, well, yeah, but they stole it from another tribe,
Yeah.
right? These people were warriors.
Hmm.
And he goes on this long discussion about how they're a warrior culture, and how if they wanted something, they would just take it, and they'd slaughter the other tribe and they'd take the land. He says, for any area of land, we'd have to, if we're going to say, because Theo Von was kind of making a BS joke about give it back.
Hmm.
He says, so Joe says, yeah, but to who or to whom?
Yeah.
And he goes like not on a nicer rant than what I usually do. And I just kind of I feel like we're kind of getting to, in our culture, those little examples. I feel like they're green shoots they're growing, that I think maybe we're starting to actually use some common sense, and really the truth is
Yeah.
kind of breaking through. About
Maybe.
America is a great country, and granted, we took land that was previously controlled by the Cherokee and the Kiowa and all those, and that, yeah, okay, got it. But do they have any claim to it? No, not really, other than force. Okay, we forced them out. Does that make us worse than them? No, makes them no better than the same.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, this came
Anyway,
up in New Zealand. I don't know if you've seen the clips in the New Zealand
yes,
Parliament where you have, the Maori representatives. They're tearing up this bill and they do their
the
what's it called,
Haka.
haka. Yeah, which was
Yes,
kind of cool like 10 years ago, and they were doing it for like a rugby thing. But now it's like this big like left-wing activist thing to do. Like we're going back to our roots, and they tear up the
yeah,
bill and they're chanting in Parliament. And the bill that was so aggressive and so hateful towards the Maori people was literally just saying we need to remove the special protections and the special benefits that we give to the Maori, and everybody will be treated equally under the law. Everybody has
yes,
the same rights. And they're so worked up about this. And it's like, no, we need to fight back against these colonizers, blah, 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 blah. And the people were pointing out that the Maori have only been on New Zealand since like 1300, and they killed
correct.
all of the native population, the Moriori, who were there before them.
Yes,
And so it's like, Okay, well
And,
then,
and I think they were cannibals.
yeah,
I think
it might have been.
think
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, horrible. And I think if you're going to do the haka, it should be in one of two concepts, in one context. One is a rugby match where if you're against some other powerful people that will hurt you as part of rugby. Rugby, the part of the fun is that you're banging into each other or whatever. Or you're at war and you're doing that dance right before you all try to like spear each
Because it
other
is like
and eat each other.
yeah, like a war, like battle chant. So it kind of makes sense
Yes,
for a
right.
competitive physical sport, but for you
Yes.
to protest tearing up a bill in the New Zealand Parliament, and it's
Yeah.
just activism, it's just performative.
No, I'm really being real about this. I think that the other people in the parliament should have tackled them and beat them up.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, haka? Yeah, let's go. You know? Uh, and of course, you look around when you see the camera pull back,
Mhm.
all the other politicians in there are like,
It's like,
really?
yeah,
Really? And then the guy, whoever the big fat speaker, or whether the Speaker of the House or whatever, their parliamentarian or whatever it was, he's like, we are now adjourned, clear the lobby or whatever
yeah,
they're for him. And it's just matter of fact, like you clowns.
yeah,
But ultimately that may not pass because some of the coalition partners are backing away
sure,
from it. But
yeah,
if
whatever.
they pull that kind of stuff, they ought to just say, okay, we're going to pass that plus. I mean, that's the only way to deal with those people. You say, okay, now we're going to do it. So now we're not going to treat you equal. Now you're 10% less. Now you're 90% of the rest of us. And if you tear up another piece of paper in here and do some stupid dance, now you're 80.
Yeah.
That's the only way you can end it.
Hmm.
Was just my theory about Trump.
Yeah.
His
Yeah.
appointments. I think he knows that, and you have to escalate
Yeah.
because otherwise they will not stop escalating against you. And he's learned that the hard way. My
Mhm.
God.
Yeah. No kidding.
Anyway, so we got the next one.
Yes, and this is
The
the last one that I think we
Okay, good.
discussed for this
Yes.
time.
Yes.
And this one was essentially about he tells the story about a mountain lion was killed by police in California because it was super
Yeah.
close to a school. Then there were protests that were like, "Well, you shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have killed this beautiful animal. How could you do that?" And his point throughout here is, we're valuing animals' lives more than our own, human lives. This is
Yes.
completely ridiculous. The police did the right thing. Why would they be expected to try and peacefully get this, predator, cat out of this tree as it's stalking these children by
They
this?
got a local school. It's
Yeah.
like a block away from the school. And it's about to let out.
Hmm.
And they're like, okay, what are we going to do? Because these are just cops, beat cops. So they shot it and killed it. And I think the money quote was, and it will never occur to people with academic degrees and professorships that they are both ignorant and incompetent in vast areas of human life, much less that they should keep in mind before they vent their emotions and wax self-righteous. And that's really a theme of a lot of his writing. But he kind of predicts the BLM stuff,
Mm.
really the defund the police in this article, because he talks about how they're criticizing the police who are just trying to do what they can in an imperfect situation. And who are you to second guess it, you dumb academics? It's only going to worse, of course.
Yeah, I like what he says too. He says the fact that academics are overwhelmingly of the political left is perfectly
Mhm.
consistent with their assumption that third parties, especially third parties like themselves, should be controlling the decisions of other people who have firsthand knowledge and experience.
Yes.
The cops should be listening to me, and they should, listen to what I, professor of sociology at UCLA, say about dealing with this mountain lion. And I think that's
Yes.
very true. Um, but yeah, no, and I think it also plays into another topic with just how we're valuing animals. I think sometimes more than like human children. By some people, you hear that a lot with like oh, I'm just a dog mom, and they'll
Mhm.
push their dogs around in little strollers, and they won't have kids because they have a dog instead.
Yes.
That's going back to the family discussion, but yeah,
Yeah.
crazy
Yeah,
stuff.
and I'm getting to the point where I'm being insulted enough that I'm going to start commenting to people in
Oh
person,
no.
because it's not the same,
Hmm.
and you're comparing my children to dogs unfavorably. Oh, I think I have to deal with this stuff, and the dogs don't talk back to me. Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, well, if you have a heart attack and die in the kitchen, eventually that dog's going to eat you.
That's
The
true.
kids, probably not.
Probably not.
They're probably going to call for an ambulance.
Oh my gosh.
But maybe that's more accurate for a cat.
Yeah.
But tough times. Although they're lovely dogs. I have dogs, and they wouldn't eat me at first, but eventually, you got to do what you got to do.
That's true. All right. Well, do you have any other final thoughts on
I
these?
think that's a great way to end a podcast. Is this season 10?
This is season 10. I think
That's
like
crazy.
we hit 4 years in like 5 days or something.
Oh,
Doing this
should
for
throw a
I think,
party.
yeah, November 22nd, I think is
Oh,
we
nice.
started. So
Yeah. All right.
yeah,
That's crazy.
this for a while. Yeah, we hit the 10,000 download mark. I don't know if
Mhm.
I told you that, but we crossed that threshold. So more than
Nice.
10,000 people have, or at least 10,000 downloads have happened.
Downloads.
Yeah.
There's one guy downloading them all multiple
Yes.
times.
Yeah,
I got
exactly.
a new computer. I need to download them all. It's me.
You just have
Multiple
15
copies.
copies of every single episode saved
That's
on your
right.
computer. All right.
Trying to
Well,
buy them
dude.
up like in the olden times when they had paper newspapers. If there's a big scandal, you try to send people out to buy up all the papers.
Yeah.
That was the thing.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to reading the rest of this.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, very easy to read, of course, and
Yes.
a lot of opportunities to kind of talk about whatever we want to. So
Have you read any of the Thomas Sowell
no, this
books?
is like the first thing that I've read, fully by him. So
Yeah, good intro to his
I've seen
thought.
like interviews and stuff like that, so I
Mhm.
kind of know his general vibe, but I'd never really read anything. So
Excellent.
this is good. All right.
Yes.
Well, this has been season 10, episode 1 of Unlimited Opinions. You can, of course, follow us on Twitter at ULMTD Opinions. I have been Adam Bishop.
Still Mark Bishop.